My name is Josh. I never cared much about new kids at school. They came and went without making much of an impression. Socorro, New Mexico wasn't exactly a hot destination either. People didn't move here. They left. So when I walked into school that morning and heard whispers of some transfer student showing up halfway through senior year, I barely registered it. Who changes schools in their last semester anyway? I found out soon enough. The first time I saw Charlie, he was sitting on the edge of some random desk in first period English, legs stretched out like he owned the place. Dark hair, a little messy like he hadn't brushed it, a lean build, and a face that made people look twice. He had this way of smirking, like he already knew what you were going to say and was just waiting for you to prove him right. I didn't care. Not at all. I took my usual seat by the window, ignoring the way people whispered about him. But then the teacher asked Charlie to introduce himself, and something in his voice made me glance up. Charlie Vega, he said, casual as anything. We just moved here from El Paso. Figured we'd give Socorro a shot. Big change, the teacher commented. Charlie smiled. We'll see. A harmless introduction. And yet, when I turned back to the rest of the class, I caught people leaning in, paying attention. By lunch, he wasn't just some transfer student, he was the new kid. But who transfers schools in the middle of senior year anyway? I found him at my usual table, cracking jokes with a group of people who, until today, barely acknowledged anyone outside their social circle. And they weren't just humoring him, they were laughing, hanging on his every word. I dropped my tray onto the table, harder than necessary. His eyes flicked to mine, and for the first time, I got the full effect of his attention. It was like standing in the sun too long, warm at first, then a little uncomfortable. You're in my seat, I said flatly. Charlie raised an eyebrow. Didn't see your name on it. Someone chuckled. My jaw tightened. Come on, man, Jason Richardson said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. Plenty of room. No need to get territorial. I wasn't being territorial. I didn't like the way Charlie acted like he'd always belonged here, like he hadn't just shown up uninvited and rewritten the entire social hierarchy overnight, like it didn't take me my whole damn life to reach this level of comfort with these people. But I let it go. For the next week, I told myself I wasn't thinking about him. I wasn't noticing how people talked about him in the halls, or how teachers smiled when he answered questions in class, or how everybody loved him. I didn't care. I thought I could mind my own business. Besides, I was only months away from putting all this behind me. But then it started getting worse. I'd make a joke in class, and Charlie would top it effortlessly, leaving everyone laughing while I sat there grinding my teeth. I'd tell a story at lunch, and he'd follow up with something twice as interesting. If I aced a quiz, he somehow got a perfect score. It wasn't that he was trying to compete with me. That would have been easier. No, Charlie just existed, and somehow that was enough to make me feel like I was standing in his shadow. It was infuriating, and I wasn't the only one who thought so. Someone needs to put him in his place, Jason said one afternoon after Charlie completely dismantled him in a debate over some history assignment. Kid thinks he's hot shit. I didn't disagree, but something about Jason's tone made me uneasy. It started with little things. A shove in the hallway. A comment whispered loud enough to hear. Charlie never reacted the way Jason expected. He'd just smirk, tilt his head like he was studying some particularly uninteresting insect, and walk away. That only made him try harder. I told myself it wasn't my problem. I didn't like Charlie, but I wasn't about to play into whatever this was. Then things started to get weird. It was small at first. A drink slipping out of Jason's hand mid-taunt, soaking the front of his shirt. A chair tipping over just as someone tried to trip Charlie. A locker swinging open hard enough to smack someone in the face when they tried to corner him. People started whispering. And for the first time since Charlie showed up, I felt something other than irritation when I looked at him. I felt uneasy, and maybe a little bit afraid. It started with Jason. I should have seen it coming. He'd been getting more aggressive about Charlie ever since the guy showed him up. The usual teasing turned into something sharper, meaner. At first, it was just words whispered insults in the hallway, comments thrown Charlie's way when teachers weren't listening. But Charlie never took the bait. That only pissed Jason off more. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, right after lunch. The halls were packed, a river of students heading toward their next class. I was walking with Jason and a couple of the guys when I heard someone say Charlie's name. "You mean Carrie?" someone snickered. Jason smirked. "Yeah, just waiting for his big prom meltdown." They laughed, but I felt a twinge of unease. The nickname floated around for a few days now, whispered in the halls, scrawled in Sharpie on the edge of desks. It wasn't just a joke anymore. People were starting to believe it. Then, ahead of us, Charlie turned the corner. Jason didn't hesitate. He moved fast, stepping into Charlie's path so abruptly that Charlie had to stop short to avoid slamming into him. "What's your deal, man?" Jason sneered. Charlie blinked, unimpressed. "Do I have one?" I couldn't figure out why it made me smile to see Charlie kind of upset. Is it possible to like the way a person's mouth curved? Even if it was a frown? Did that even make sense? "You walk around here like you're better than everyone, like you think you're untouchable." Charlie tilted his head, considering. Then he shrugged. "I don't think about you that much." Jason's face turned red. The guys behind him chuckled, but not in a way that was friendly. They wanted a show. Jason's temper flared hard and fast, and I saw it in the way his jaw clenched, in the way his hands curled into fists. I should have stopped him. Instead, I stood there as Jason shoved Charlie, hard. Everything happened too quickly after that. Charlie barely staggered, but something else did. The classroom door beside us slammed shut. Hard. Hard enough that the entire hallway went silent. Hard enough that the lights flickered overhead. A cold prickle ran down my spine. Jason's smirk faltered, and for a second, no one moved. Then someone whispered, "Holy shit." Charlie exhaled through his nose, his lips pressing together like he was holding something back. He looked at Jason, not angry, not scared, just watching. Jason took a step back, but he covered it with a laugh. "Right, real funny, dude." Charlie didn't say anything. He walked away, and that's when the rumors really started. By the next day, people were convinced Charlie slammed the door with his mind. Some swore they saw his eyes change colors, or even light up altogether. Others claimed he didn't even flinch when Jason shoved him. I didn't take part in any of it. No matter how many times the rumors were brought up to me, I didn't comment either way. But then things kept happening. At least everyone said they did anyway. In gym class, Trent, one of Jason's closest friends, tripped in the middle of a relay race and sprained his wrist. He swore something yanked his leg out from under him, though I was certain it was all him. The next morning, a stack of books fell off a desk as another one of Jason's guys walked past it. That afternoon, a locker door fell open without anyone touching it. I saw that one, and clearly it wasn't locked properly and had too much junk crammed into it. But others claimed it flew open so hard that it dented the locker next to it, although at any time anyone could clearly see there was no damage done. Anytime something happened, people looked at Charlie. It got so bad he didn't even have to be near it for it to be attributed to our own personal Carrie. I hated that name. Charlie never denied it. He smiled that infuriating little smile, like he could care less. I watched him closely, waiting for a tell, some sign that he was bothered by any of it, that he was even partially upset with how people treated him. But there was nothing. He was just calm. Too calm. The school started avoiding him. Whispers followed him down the halls. People gave him a wide berth in the cafeteria, like he was carrying some kind of invisible force field. The only ones who didn't back off were Jason and his friends. I guessed that was still me. I was still one of Jason's friends, though I kept my distance from him for a while by this point. I wasn't sure why I kept watching him, why I cared so much. I told myself it was only curiosity that I wanted to figure him out. But the truth was, it was something more. Something I didn't understand when I looked at him. A strange pull in my chest. A twinge of something. Like a memory I couldn't quite place. Like a song I almost knew the words to. And it terrified me. By the next week, Charlie Vega was officially a walking horror story, It started with whispers, always loud enough for him to hear. Freak. Witch. Carry. Someone scrawled demon in red marker across his locker. When he walked into a room, conversations cut off like someone flipped a switch. Then people started avoiding him. It was subtle at first, people leaving space between themselves and Charlie in the cafeteria, choosing different seats in class. Then it got worse. No one would partner with him for group projects. He sat alone at lunch, his table in no man's land. Charlie never complained, never looked upset. He barely seemed to notice. That's what unnerved me the most. Because when you're isolated like that, when people are watching your every move, waiting for proof that you don't belong, you should react, get mad, defend yourself. Something. Charlie just existed in it, as if nothing, let alone this, bothered him. I long before told myself it wasn't my problem. Then Jason decided to make it mine. He needs to be put in his place, he said one afternoon, cracking his knuckles as we stood outside the cafeteria. The others grunted in agreement, feeding off each other like a pack of stray dogs sniffing out a fight. I was about to tell them to drop it when the door swung open, and Charlie stepped out. Jason moved fast. Too fast. 1 second, Charlie was walking past us, and the next, Jason grabbed his shoulder and shoved. Charlie stumbled. Not much, only a half step back. But when he looked up, there was something sharp in his expression. Something dangerous. And then, crack. The cafeteria window next to us exploded. Glass shattered outward, sharp, glittering shards spraying us all. People screamed. A girl dropped her tray. Someone yelled for a teacher. But no one moved. They were all staring at Charlie. Charlie, who hadn't lifted a finger. Charlie, who just tilted his head and smiled. Jason stumbled back, his cocky smirk gone. His hands were shaking. He curled them into fists to hide it. But I saw. We all did. None of us were cut or hurt. But it was all very jarring. Charlie's eyes flicked to mine, and for the first time, I felt like he wasn't just looking at me. He was seeing me. I didn't realize before this, his eyes were a lighter shade of brown than I previously thought. My stomach twisted. The silence broke all at once, chaos crashing down in shouts and accusations. Someone ran to get the principal. Jason was still backing up, cursing under his breath. The others were already turning on their heels, walking away like they wanted no part in whatever this was. Charlie? Charlie turned and walked off, calm as ever. I didn't move. I was looking at my hands. They were clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. My breath was coming fast, shallow. And worst of all, I knew. I knew exactly how the window shattered, and it had nothing to do with Charlie Vega. By the time Monday rolled around, the school wasn't just avoiding Charlie anymore. They were afraid of him. It was in the way people stiffened when he walked past, the way conversations dropped to nervous whispers when he entered a room. It wasn't only Jason and his friends anymore. Everyone was convinced now. Convinced that the strange things happening weren't just coincidence, that Charlie Vega wasn't normal, that he was dangerous. And I should have left it alone. I should have gone back to ignoring him, back to pretending I didn't care. But every time I tried, I found myself watching, studying him. Charlie never seemed scared. He should have been. Any normal person would have been. But if anything, he looked bored, like he was waiting for something, like all of this, the rumors, the stares, the tension, was just some long, drawn-out game that no one else understood. Then Jason decided to take things further. It happened in the gym. 5th period PE right before lunch. The coaches split us into teams for some half-assed basketball game, more about killing time than actual competition. Jason and a couple of his guys were on my team, while Charlie was stuck on the opposite side of the court. I kept an eye on him anyway, not on purpose. At least that's what I told myself. Even though a part of me wished I could find gym shorts that fit me as well as his fit him. Not that I cared, but I couldn't stop noticing. The game dragged on, and I could tell Jason was getting restless. The ball barely mattered anymore. His attention was on Charlie. The others could feel it too. a shift in energy, something thick and heavy hanging in the air. And then Jason made his move. The ball was in play, bouncing between hands, sneakers squeaking across the court. Charlie caught a pass when Jason charged. It wasn't a normal block. It wasn't even a foul. It was deliberate. Jason was bigger, stronger, and he was aiming straight for Charlie's ribs at full speed. I opened my mouth, to yell, to stop him, to say anything, but instead, Jason's body jerked back. Like something grabbed him midair and yanked him away. He hit the ground hard, skidding across the polished wood, arms flailing. The entire gym froze. A heavy silence. A breath held in unison. Jason groaned, rolling onto his side, dazed but otherwise fine. No one looked at him. They were all staring at Charlie. Charlie, standing there with his hands at his sides, his expression unreadable. Not smug, not scared, just watching. Someone cursed under their breath. Then the room erupted. What the hell? He didn't even... Did you see? Dude, Carrie's a freak. Charlie sighed. And then, slowly, he turned his head. His eyes landed on mine. A slow, cautious look. And I knew then, I had to look away. It wasn't only his shorts that fit well. It was eyes that gazed well. My stomach twisted. Jason scrambled to his feet, face red with anger, doing his best to mask his fear. You think this is funny? He spat. You think we don't know what you are? Charlie didn't answer. He didn't need to. The entire gym knew. And that's when I realized this was all only going to get worse. By the time the final bell rang, Jason was already talking about payback. Not only him either. His whole new group. It wasn't about petty insults anymore, about stupid high school rivalries. This was bigger, darker. Charlie humiliated him. In a way none of them could process. With power none of them could begin to understand. And he did it in front of the whole school. Jason wasn't the kind of guy to let petty things slide, and this went far beyond petty. He needs to be put in his place, Jason said under his breath as we walked through the parking lot. The others nodded. I kept my mouth shut. But inside I felt sick. Because I knew Jason. I knew what he was capable of, and whatever he was planning, it wasn't just some prank. He wanted to break Charlie, publicly, completely. And the worst part? Charlie knew. When I passed him in the hallway later, he didn't look scared. He didn't look worried. If anything, he looked like he'd been waiting for this. The gym buzzed with anticipation, the kind of restless energy that built before something big happened. It was the final pep rally before regionals, and nearly the entire school was packed onto the bleachers, all eyes on the makeshift stage at the center of the basketball court. But I wasn't watching the cheerleaders or the overhyped football players flexing for the crowd. I was watching them. A few from my so-called friend group loitered near the edge of the court, exchanging smirks. Something was about to go down. And Charlie? He stood exactly where they wanted him, right in the middle of it all. I don't know how they lured him there. Maybe a fake apology, maybe some stupid excuse. But there he was, standing near the team benches, completely unaware that everyone was watching him. No, not unaware. Unbothered. Charlie adjusted his sleeves, looking like he was waiting for something. Or maybe he always waited for this moment. The second Jason stepped forward, that uneasy feeling in my gut hardened into something worse. Something is going to happen. The air felt charged. I gritted my teeth. I was powerless to stop this. Jason moved fast. Too fast. His shoulder slammed into Charlie's, a textbook move meant to send him sprawling. Except, Charlie didn't fall. He didn't stumble, didn't flinch. He barely moved an inch. Jason, on the other hand, went flying. Not in a dramatic movie-style way, but in a way that didn't make sense. 1 second he was pushing forward. The next his feet slipped out from under him, and he landed hard on his back, like he'd been shoved by something unseen. The gym froze. The sound of Jason hitting the ground echoed like a gunshot in the silence. Someone laughed, but it was nervous, uncertain. And then, it happened again. A metal folding chair scraped across the floor, moving on its own. Someone near the bleachers gasped. Charlie hadn't moved. His arms were still crossed, his expression unreadable. But everyone saw what happened. They saw it, and that was enough. The tension in the room snapped. People shoved back against the bleachers, whispers turned to frantic voices. Someone actually screamed, like this was some horror movie, like Charlie was about to unleash hell on all of them. I could feel it coming before it even happened. That strange pressure, which tingling in the air, like the moment before a lightning strike. My heart slammed against my ribs. The banners hanging from the rafters rippled despite the lack of wind. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, then flared bright enough to burn spots into my vision. Then, the floor shook. A tremor, just enough to rattle the metal bleachers, enough to send water bottles rolling and bouncing across the gym floor. It lasted barely a second. But it was enough. Gasps, panic, silence. Then Charlie turned. Not to the crowd, not to Jason, who was scrambling backward like he thought Charlie was about to come after him. Charlie turned to me, and the look in his eyes steadily, sharp, knowing, hit me like a freight train. I stopped breathing. I couldn't let him take the blame anymore. It wasn't him, I said. It was me. It was always me. And the trembling fully stopped the moment I looked down at the floor. A teacher took a step toward me, and it started again. When they stopped, it stopped. When they took a third step, I sent a third tremble. The silence in the gym was suffocating. No one spoke. No one moved. They just stared. Jason was still on the ground, gaping up at me like I was some kind of monster. The same guy who spent years making fun of kids who believed in ghosts now looked like he'd seen one. No one else was any better. Their mouths opened and closed, but no words came out. My so-called friends stood frozen in place, not in awe, not in admiration, but in fear. Fear of me. I felt it pressing in from all sides. The whispers, the uncertainty, the realization rippling through the crowd. I wasn't just popular Josh. I wasn't just another senior. I was dangerous. Someone shifted in the bleachers, the sound scraping through the unbearable quiet. A few people started backing away. This wasn't going to disappear. By the end of the day, the entire school, probably the entire town, would know what happened here. I didn't care. But I was supposed to care, wasn't I? The old me, the one who spent so much time trying to prove something to people who never really liked me anyway, would have panicked. I would have tried to explain it away, lie, deny, pretend. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. Charlie still hadn't looked away. Unlike the others, he wasn't afraid, not even a little. Instead, he smirked, head tilting slightly, like he'd just won some kind of bet with himself. He had that same annoying look he had since the moment I met him, and it sucked that this was the moment I realized, or at least admitted to myself, that I wanted to kiss that stupid smile away. I didn't have to explain this to him. He walked up to me, in front of everyone, tugged my hand with his and gestured toward the door. And I swear these people were more afraid, more appalled when he touched my hand than when they found out I was telekinetic. Though we were a row into the parking lot, I could still feel all their eyes from every available door on us. He looked back on last time, then looked at me and said, "You know I always knew it. From the moment I got here, to Albuquerque, I could feel you from 100 miles away." The words hit me harder than they should have. Charlie came to Socorro because of me, not because of some random move, not because of his parents, not because of bad luck, because of me. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I had nothing to say to that. No excuse, no argument, no clever comeback. Charlie always knew. Teachers, coaches, someone from the front office, and dozens of students came rushing out, their voices cutting through the stunned silence. "What's going on? What happened?" Everyone calm down. Too late for that. Somewhere in the crowd, someone called out, "He's a freak." Another voice whispered, He could have killed someone. The words should have stung. Maybe a part of me still wanted them to, but I wasn't listening anymore. I wasn't waiting for the punishment, the rejection, the inevitable downfall. I was done. I turned my back on them, on all of them. On the fear, the rumors, the pointless game I'd been playing for years. And then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, Charlie fell into step beside me. We walked to my car together. We didn't run. We didn't have to. We just left. The school, the staring faces, the questions, the judgment, all of it faded behind us. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know what it meant, or where this was going, or why I had these powers in the first place. But I did know one thing. I wasn't alone anymore. I know too soon to say that. But not really.